friends, colleagues, Your Excellency. Thanks for our public lecture event. And I am very much privileged to be presenting you today to our esteemed partners, colleagues, guests and friends, Dr. Troy Sternberg and Dr. Irna Hoffman. It happens to be our relations with Irna dates back to the early 2011 when we met first time up in Newcastle. And I was just a PhD student completing my PhD as part of the UCA Central Asian Faculty Development Program. And with Troy, we've met a few years ago when he came down here for the scoping. We're brainstorming ideas, and here we are. A few years later, we have a joint project run between the University of Oxford, Institute of Public Policy and Administration of UCA, and our partners in Mongolia, where we try to study the impacts of the Chinese infrastructure on mining communities, and we try to develop a model how to mitigate the conflict potential. And they are here partially thanks to our joint project, but also thanks to the conference that Mountain Societies Research Institute is having on February 5th, which I encourage everyone to apply or attend. Today's lecture is sort of split into two sections. One of them is Troy. He's going to be speaking about the citizen science and the value it's going to have for our communities. And the second part, presentation by Irna, it's on the agricultural transformations, but to be precise, it's about the Chinese investment in agriculture, business intelligence, or somewhat related, right? Or maybe I'm confusing, but the only part that I'm really requesting you is that the second part, could you please abide to the Chatham House rules, which basically means no reference or no video or no stripping for the second part due to the confidentiality of the things that might be discussed. So Chatham House rules for this one. But once again, these are my colleagues with a wealth and breadth of experience and knowledge. And most importantly, they are members of this so-called Oxford Central Asian network. So this is the community of academic and scholars based in Oxford who have a vested interest in Central Asia and who wants the Central Asia to be rediscovered, I guess. Absolutely. And with these words, I would like to give a floor to our first speaker, please.
All right, it's a pleasure to come back to UCA. Always nice to be in Kyrgyzstan in particular. I first visited in 2002, and so I can see the great changes over the years, and so I'm happy to be at such an institution. We've had this partnership now for a year and a half. It's gone very well, and so we look forward to future cooperation with UCA. Now, opposite to the next talk, there's no Chatham House rules now, and please tell everybody about it. So it's quite the opposite, because the whole idea of citizen science is how to make science more relevant and better informed by the communities in which it takes place. So really, citizen science is for everybody. Think of it as the broadest possible type of research or engagement. And last week, I told somebody that I was going to give a talk on citizen science, and they scoffed at me. They said, "Oh, you're from Oxford, it'll be so boring. You'll talk about a lot of numbers and some theories, and we won't understand any of it. So why should I bother?" So hopefully it'll be more interesting than that. And actually, I start with this picture from Oxford, not just to show where I'm from, but actually there's some citizen science going on in this building right here that I'll tell you about later. So my first slide is very simple. Who caught the snake? If we look at this picture, is it this researcher, this one lone white researcher in the front, or is it the community of people in Africa that caught the snake? So just think about who's actually doing the work, the activities, the research. Who found the snake? I don't think this white guy was out beating the bush trying to find the snake. So we should acknowledge there's a great role for local communities, for local people to actually contribute and even drive research. So if in this picture we see some policemen, we see lots of local villagers, we see the savannah where the snake came from. So I think it's very important to realize that though we might read something from the researcher, he didn't do it by himself. Same when I'm here in Kyrgyzstan. If I go to the countryside, it's not me alone doing something. It's usually me following the Kyrgyz actually doing the work. So there's a great role for citizen science for communities to help inform their own world. So what's the challenge we're facing? Why do we care about citizen science? We should think also about the reasons why we do this. We don't just go out and look at birds or count cars and traffic for our own good, but hopefully it can contribute to better understanding. So it's a way for all of us, not just researchers, to have some knowledge, some perception, some understanding of the world we live in. Science, by the name itself, we know it's going to investigate, it might measure, it's going to document, it's going to research. Much science takes years, so we don't even see the outcomes of it in a time that we might even remember what the project was. But our goal is to advance physical and social science. So if you mention citizen science, people usually think of environmental factors, of biodiversity, of water, of plants, of vegetation. But equally, it can be economics, politics, social interaction, anthropology as well. So it's really much broader. It's whatever we can really think of and generate. And at the end, I'm going to also ask you for some of your ideas on what might be effective citizen science here in Kyrgyzstan. So we're trying to advance knowledge, and we're advancing knowledge so we can improve life, right? And so how can we better our world? How can we change the world we live in to be productive and enjoyable for as many of us as possible? Sometimes people say, well, we have enough scientists. A politician in the UK now, Michael Gove, says the people are tired of experts, but yet they want to have a cure to coronavirus and things like that. So we always need more information as our world keeps changing. There's this complexity everywhere, whether it's the environment or society. We can never document all or know enough. When people talk about climate change, what do we know about? We know there's no snow and it's quite warm today. Is this just this year, or don't we need to know 50 years, 100 years, a millennium? So there's so much information that we need to understand when engaging with our world. So there's this great complexity, and there's never enough research, there's never enough researchers. So researchers globally, it's a fraction of 1% of the population. Most people never have any interaction with research, but everybody lives in our world, in our environment, in our community, and engages with it and has ideas, has perceptions of what's happening around them. So rather than waiting for someone like Kemal or me or Irna to come out and make some decision, conclusion, we should engage as many people as possible because they have good information. And locals, of course, will have better information than outsiders. And just because we have a title or a name doesn't mean we have all the answers. So really, citizen science really helps give information and drive science forward. The subjects are endless. In Kyrgyzstan, people tell me about the air pollution this year. I met somebody, they actually have an air pollution monitor, so they're keeping track of PM 2.5 in their house, outside, around their community. So that's citizen science. Then if they were to upload this information to a website that may be monitoring citizen science, or maybe a government site, we can start building greater information about air pollution in this region. And something like this became very important in Beijing some years ago because the only source for PM 2.5 was on the US Embassy roof. And the Chinese government, they recorded it across the fragrant hills, like far away from downtown. So only by citizens actually being able to document the pollution in Beijing did we start getting an idea about the pollution levels there. So Kyrgyzstan's much more open, so people can do this. It'd be great to see how they might work together. Coronavirus, there's so much to be done. You know, we're just starting at the point of infection, but there'll be many corollaries to it that a few scientists, a few doctors in China or the West will not be able to have all the information. So people will become very important in this. Donald Trump, the things he says and does. There's citizen science in the U.S. monitoring the number of lies he says every day, every week, every month, every year. So the government is not going to do it because he's in charge of the government. But through this idea of citizen science, people can do the monitoring. They can report, they can give information. Then we can decide what we need to do to deal with this issue because we have an idea of the scale from the citizen scientist. Climate change, that's everything, recording temperatures, seasonal change. It could be precipitation, it could be CO2 emissions. All these things we read about in the newspaper, it has to come from somewhere. Where did we get this data? Who provided this information? And how much is there? With climate change, we have some points. Europe and UK is very well studied, US, and then their capital cities are usually well studied, but most of the world, there's not much data being recorded. But in most areas, people are living there. If we can more effectively bring in local citizens into documenting what's happening with them in their environment, with their climate, then we'll have a better chance to address the issues. Self-driving cars. I don't want to be the one that sits in the car and watches it crash. So we need a lot of people to be doing the work on this. And some people think, oh, Google's doing that for me, but it's not. It's a lot of people. There's these vast computer networks where people actually are testing things on the computer models like that to see what might be effective and what might lead to a car crash. So most things that are happening, most development, most changes, we can track and engage with citizen science for these things. And I was really surprised this morning when I opened my computer to look at The Guardian, newspaper from London. One of the main articles is Bosporus amateur ship spotters keep watch on global power struggle. So it's there's the link. It's free to read, but basically in 2015 it was Turks that monitored the Bosporus, the straits that go through Istanbul, that noticed that Russians were sending a different type of ship through that could only be used for combat and war, things like that. So by knowing their local environment, knowing the ships that usually pass through, then when they see a certain type of submarine, and there was one boat in particular that one man spotted, then they're the ones that first realize the intention of Russia in Syria, in the Middle East. So it wasn't some CIA drone or maybe some Turkish military outpost, but it's actually just ordinary citizens that first identified that link, that tells us what's going to be happening in the Middle East. So it's a nice article. It goes quickly, but it's just a man with a camera who got up early one day and had some idea from his own sense. So not documented, but just a sense inside that something was changing in the boats that were going through. So it becomes a very personal thing where if I or a researcher were to go there, we'd have no idea, we'd miss all the other clues that this man knew intuitively. This is from the US government. What is citizen science? So many words, black and white, very boring. So we don't need that. What we really need is just a more direct understanding of what we're talking about. Citizen science, public participation in scientific research. But don't let the word scientific scare you. It can be social science, physical science. It's providing information. It's people doing field work, monitoring, measuring, documenting. So a research is only one person, but a group, a community can be tens or hundreds monitoring whatever it is that we are interested in. And this extra information advances scientific research. So this is something that will push information further because we know more. It increases understanding of our world. And that's what we need today, especially with all the connectivity, the globalization. The more information, the understanding of the information, then we can make better informed decisions. Any subject, any topic. It could be, you know, from fire ecology in Australia to opera in Vienna. Anything that's worthy of our time and effort can be engaged with through citizen science. What is it really doing? It's taking measurements, data points, you know, things like temperature or counting the number of deer in the forest are quite direct. Measuring pollution, rubbish, things like that can equally do it. The number of times Trump lies, it's all these different things, but it's paying attention to what's going on around us for a particular purpose. We can pick any question. So it's not just environmental. We can do what we want. And photo documentation is a great feature because it actually captures the scene. So whether it's you know, stream flow, or if it's illegal parking in town, we are able to take pictures that tell us what is happening in the scene, and we can evaluate them later at another point in time. We can count anything. You'll be surprised what scientists count. Animals, of course, trees, types of trees, trees that are budding, trees that have some sort of scar on it, trees that have been touched by fire. There's so much that people like to investigate. Everything about people. You go to the airport, of course, we're all very monitored there, but maybe we want to monitor people for other, how much they use a certain park, how much they use a water fountain, things like this that are well known throughout history for telling us about our society. One of the, we might say, the earliest examples of citizen science was in London in the 19th century. There was a TB epidemic, and they couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And so one man started asking people where they got their water from. And just by asking people and tracking them, he made all these lines, and he figured out it was one well in particular. And he went there, and in front of a crowd, he broke the wooden arm on the pump so they could no longer pump water out of it. And though at the time people thought that was terrible, in fact, that was the beginning of the end of the epidemic. So it just took an individual to figure these things out. Scientists or governments alone are not able to always do this. So individuals, that might be us. It could be community-driven research, often with environmental factors, pollution, traffic, things like that. A community has an issue they want to have addressed, and so if they can't wait for government to respond, they'll do it themselves, and then they try and provide the information. And today, with the internet, we have many forms of conveying information. Or it could be more global investigations. Like there's networks monitoring climate data from around the world. So people on computers entering what the information at their site. So it goes, it repeats, it repeats. So you can imagine how big the data sets become. And with the size and the increase of information, the more valuable, the more valid they're going to be, the more information they have. Because if we have one day that's 20 degrees and one day that's 0, we'll say the average temperature is 10. But if we have 100 days, the average temperature will be much more nuanced. It'll be 7.8 or something like that. But we need more information to have a better sense of what's going on. So it really started with a collaboration with scientists and universities like UCA. So originally the idea was, oh, a scientist is coming, we can help provide more information. But it doesn't have to be limited to that. Researchers, schools can do this, data managers. In Oxford, it's the PhD students that are going out, working with communities, trying to get more information. And of course, government can do that. And depending on the type of government, some governments will actually want more information. There's a nice project of citizen science in India that a professor in Birmingham University just did. And it was documenting where students on their way to school stop, spend time. And what she wanted to know is where they congregated. Where was the point most students went through? And in India, it was important because they decided, based on this data, where to put public toilets. so that they could track the flow of people and know where these social goods would be most useful. The idea is the citizen science people are volunteering their time. If I have a project, maybe I'll have, if I can get some extra money, maybe I'll say, if we do this this work, then we can have a meal or something like that. But basically the idea is it's volunteer, and it's out of people's goodwill and their own desire to contribute to their societies. So that's very nice, as opposed to only waiting for money before you take any action. It's much more effective if we have a desire to do these things. We get much more done because we have more information, more samples, more sightings of rare birds, whatever. We can better build a picture of the world around us that we wouldn't get if we just take a snapshot at one point in time. And there's a group, citizenscience.org, it's a public website. You can look at that. They have ideas. They like members from around the world. So it's something to look at to encourage citizen science taking place here in Kyrgyzstan. What are these people doing? What's their project? Butterflies, yeah. So this is pretty direct, right? The butterflies. So one thing might be, in this area, butterflies might be what's called a keystone species. So if the butterfly population is high, then they know the natural habitat, the vegetation is good, and it provides enough energy, food for the butterflies. So it might be something like that. It might be the species of butterflies that are coming. And certainly with climate change, changing weather patterns and water availability, migration patterns for butterflies, birds, et cetera, are being affected. Okay, this one. Okay, so we see some gorillas from the London Zoo, their names. Now, we know it wasn't the gorilla who wrote his name on this blackboard, right? So what really happened is we have the local villager who's going through the forest and able to spot the gorillas that London Zoo wants to identify and work with. So you can be sure this is the man that's finding the gorillas. It's not the researcher from London who flew out in his khaki outfit finding the gorillas, right? So there's a very key role for the citizen part of citizen science. So when we're doing it as an investigation, we can ask, what is a research question we want to answer? So think of the gorillas. Maybe they want to know the health of the gorilla, the distribution of the gorillas, the numbers of the gorillas. Has things changed? The human influence, forest loss, habitat loss, the conflict, the fighting. Are gorillas, they've been trapped, things like this that happen. So first, scientifically here, we want to have an idea of what we're trying to answer, and then we can design our research backwards for that. And I'll give you an example of one of my experiences. So how do we do this? In the field, here we have, this is Indonesia, measuring the tree, measuring the vines growing on the tree. Here we have, this is Nepal, the water, looking at the turbidity, the clearness, or how much solids are in it, and how clear is the water. Are there fish in the water, things like that tell the local people something about it. This is, I'll show this again a little later. This is just a water testing kit. If you want to know how good this water is, you can just dip this stick in there, and just by the color that it turns, you can see what the quality of your water is. It gives you a basic idea. Now, it's not going to be to a global standard, but for citizen science, we want information, and if it's important, we can come back with more expensive equipment. This is in the lab. So this is a picture. You could take this picture on the iPhone or any phone, and then it's not always what happens out there, but then it comes back to a lab or an office, and people in the community can identify what they see. So this is about plastic pollution, identifying these little pieces. what are they finding in the area. So as a scientist, I would not have time to go through 100 or 1,000 pictures to know what's the micro pollution in one area. But through citizen science, many people can spend a few minutes or a few hours looking at a picture, tagging them, so that they just identify these things. This probably took a minute, and then they're done, and then you go on to the next one. So the research or the institute can get much information much more quickly this way than going out by yourself. And also imagine if you tried to go out there and on your knees start counting this, you'll never get it finished. So citizen science has a great role to play. This is a very nice picture. Any ideas what this might be about? Mexico. But what's the science part going to be of this? So we have these beautiful butterflies. Yeah, and this actually is elephant dung. So even in my lab in Oxford, we have 300 samples of elephant dung waiting to be tested, and the researcher doesn't have enough time to do it all himself. So he would love to have some local citizens come help identify what's happening in the dung, because it's about the contents of the dung, the nutrients in there, are there parasites, what's the elephant eating, is it healthy? There's much information, but really it comes from the citizens themselves. Actually, someone has to go out, collect all this, take it back to the lab, analyze it. So it's a lot of work. And the researcher in my lab that's doing this, he goes for a few weeks, gets some samples, but then when he goes back, these volunteers can provide him much more. So actually, his research is much richer because other people are actually doing much of the work. He just doesn't have the time or ability to do that. So citizen science can really make a difference on larger environmental projects. So methods, anything that can observe or document can be useful. So observation is it's like having 100 pairs of eyes out there. And today we hear about it for surveillance and cameras and all that, but it can also be more positive. Like if we want to see the butterflies or birds, somebody has to spot them. And there's not enough computer camera or computer power to spot all the birds in nature. So the UK, the largest charity is about birds, the Royal Society that deals with birds. So people go out there and they spot these rare birds because it tells them about the migration patterns and the numbers, the viability of these birds. So they can go out and take a picture and actually have new information. So it's very basic. Interviewing, what better way to find out information than asking other people? Have you seen these birds? What has the weather been like? Was there a thunderstorm here? Or did the train go by and the birds left? Like there's so many things that we can't know even from a picture. So interviewing people, that takes much time, is labor intensive. Collecting data, numbers, many numbers. So in statistics, they say N equals 30. So you need at least 30 samples. But if you have 100 samples, you'll have much stronger data, or 1,000 samples. Or instead of just Bishkek, if we have Bishkek to Naran, we're gonna have much more information. Or maybe we have enough sites around Kyrgyzstan, and then we can say something about what's happening. Time in the morning, what's happening with the birds? What's happening in the evening? Or what's happening in winter versus summer? Does temperature affect it too? In cold weather or warm weather, all these things are affecting everything. Location. So if we're doing research in Kyrgyzstan, should we also know what's happening in Tajikistan and in Kazakhstan? Or should we know about the rest of Asia? What about Myanmar, China, Thailand, Mongolia? So that takes a large effort to document all these things. Tracking, well, a big one is in the West is watching the government. What's the government doing? So how many times are the police coming by, or are they hassling us, or how many times do they come look at the sewer system or the electricity lines, or if you file a complaint, how fast is the response? All these things that provide information that then can feed back we hope positively into a feedback loop. Human rights is a big thing in many parts of the world, particularly right now on the Mexican border between the US and Mexico. It's not the government that's telling us what's happening or what the government's doing. It's human rights groups that are tracking the migrants coming to the border, trying to cross the border, documenting every child that goes into the camp, tries to match them when they leave, and then they're the ones that know that 700 children have gone missing in the US in the custody of the US government. So we can't trust the US government to do this. So we need this type of citizen science. It's different from hard science, but it's very important information. It's on the social science side. What is happening? What action are governments or institutions taking? Many countries have websites where you upload information about corruption. There's a famous one in India, I paid a bribe. So there's lots of information out there that I can't know going to talk to people, nor can I be sure that they will tell me, but there are other ways that we can collect this data. Or open sources, OpenStreetMap or Fix My Street. It's where citizens are the ones that find, here's a pothole that needs to be fixed, or here's a stoplight that's not working. Things like this. So there's lots of information we can communicate. And that's something that on Camels in my project, we're trying to have this capacity to interact and find out what's happening in the field so we can also incorporate that into our research. Technology is great. We can measure many things, all sorts of equipment. So I'll give you an example. Sometimes the good equipment may not be effective for social reasons, if not physical reasons. Even we had a case where we didn't have enough batteries to power the equipment. So then it became useless and the local people just laughed at us and said, well, we can tell you what's happening. So there's many different ways to do this. Biodiversity, traffic, a big one, environment, camera traps to count the snow leopard. They also do this in Arabia, where you put a camera and the local people come by once a day to monitor, did the camera take a picture of these rare animals? Also, a popular one is finding new stars. So through amateur astronomy, that's how many new stars are now identified. People with the interest have the time. A scientist has his purpose or his project, but may not have the time just to wander the sky, but people can effectively do this. I mentioned increasing samples, also repeating tests, change over time. And when we talk about climate change, that's a great example of this idea of change over time. Any idea what this citizen science is about? You're looking on coral from the formation on the shipwreck. So really this is from archaeology, marine archaeology. So we may think it's on Earth, but also citizen science can go underwater because these scuba divers are very enthusiastic and it gives them a new reason, purpose, and they have the skill that I would never have to go down and do some documentation. This is my hometown. This is Seattle, Washington, and they're monitoring this little quadrant. And this is a common tool where you toss this down and then you see what's happening within this area. And you do several in this one beach. So they're looking at the health of the ecosystem, what's growing on the rocks as a positive sign. Are there crabs, little other sea creatures in there? So they would do this and repeat and repeat and repeat. But this is just at the high school level. So you don't need to have a PhD to do this. All you need is some training. So it's a great source of increasing information. And probably the best invention for citizen science has been the smartphone. Now, with the ability to take a picture or to store documentation or to communicate, it's very effective. So here we have this picture, this little salamander, it looks like a newt. This picture will go back to the lab and then they'll start to incorporate it into their research. But to go out and find a salamander like that in the forest is very difficult. So in Seattle, where I'm from, we have many of these, but the forests are vast. You can spend a day and not find any. So it's really valuable if somebody else can do this for you. A typical app is kind of like this. You can be spotting birds. It might tell you where or your intent on what you were trying to look for, new spotting. Kel and I are working on developing an app that we hope to have this summer, but ours will be something like this, and we want people to use it in the same way to bring citizen science to Kyrgyzstan. And this is like bugs in your backyard, ants, beetles, whatever. Click, you push on contribute, and here's this beetle you have taken by this person, and then it goes to wherever this research is being housed. So it's a great, and it's really many ways to share it, whether it's Facebook or through websites or through research institutions. And you don't have to wait for the experts. Many people have started their own projects. So now I want to move to a very simple case that I did in the Gobi in Mongolia. And Mongolia is not your neighbor, but it's your near neighbor. We have a Mongolian here even. And so many of the contexts would be the same. It used to be under the Soviet Union, very controlled by government. Now it's quite free and open, like Kyrgyzstan. So in this environment, we had an issue with mining, water, pasture, and dust. So this is, any idea what this is for? This is the entirety, this little piece of cardboard. Okay, this is a dust trap. It's a very simple dust trap. So the idea was we needed to document the dust that might be caused or related to the mine. So how to do this with the local community. Our audience was the local community. It wasn't the mine, it wasn't the government, it was the local herders. They wanted to know about the dust. So how can we do this effectively? So in Oxford, we have these machines that see dust, like 3,000 times, and you see vast amounts of these very tiny particulates. So that's why I can realize why pollution is so important here in Kyrgyzstan. We had another project with this dust in Africa, but this is just our lab, this is just a high school volunteer coming in to help set up this project. So our design requirements, it had to be lightweight, very transportable, because I was taking it from Oxford to Mongolia. Foldable, so I could put it in my luggage. I didn't have a budget to send extra boxes. Inexpensive, maybe it would work, maybe it didn't work. We didn't even know, because we wouldn't do this in UK. We had to be able to place it in the environment, had to be rain resistant, and the purpose was to represent human animal lung capacity at the sub-micron level. So the very tiniest particles that we worry about from breathing pollution that go in our lungs. So Mongolia has animals and many people living in what they say is a very dusty environment. So we wanted to get some way to document this. But the most important thing was, what can we do that the herders would trust? That was the whole thing. If the community doesn't believe us, it doesn't matter what we do. So this is the equipment the mine has, the Dust Track 2. Very effective, costs about 10,000 pounds, so $13,000. Very effective, you put it there, and in just minutes you have multiple readings. And then you can take it, move it to the next site. But to the herders, this is a useless piece of equipment, because to them, the mine brought it, they left it for a few minutes, did something and walked away, and then most of the time there was no machine there. So they were very unhappy. They thought it was missing all the dust. So this didn't work at all. The data is great. I would love to have this, but it wasn't effective for this time. So instead, we just made this little box of cardboard, put some holes on the top and the side for the dust to come in. Everyone has to be the same. And we put a sponge in the bottom, and these are very fine filter papers that can hold the microparticles to make the, and so they all look like this. They all look the same size, holes everywhere. So we have the uniform decision, uniform approach. And this is something the herders can understand. So then it comes time to going out and placing the dust traps. And actually our biggest trouble was, can you see what our biggest trouble might be there? Absolutely, where to put them. There's no trees or anything like that, so it was a big challenge. but that was part of the fun because the herders then, these two men were driving around in the old furgon. Maybe you have some of those here. It's telling me, let's put it here, let's put it there, whatever. And my main interest was to have a distribution so they weren't all in one place. They wanted to put them all around the mine, but I was trying to explain to them that all we would find out was the mine level, but we wouldn't know 5 kilometers or 50 kilometers away. So here's another one. This is actually a wildlife park put in by the Qataris. So no one really knows what's happening there. But we had a fence there, and we could put up a dust trap there. Another one. This is an old car, and there's so few things we actually put it on the roof of the car. Another reason, it had to be where the animals wouldn't get it. So the herders, we placed a couple that were not effective, and I knew it wouldn't work, but the herders had to understand for themselves because they put it about this high, and sure enough, a camel came and ate the dust trap. And so we had camel fur is all we had left at the end of that. But then they understood the process better. So we also were able to do this with water sampling. These are the wells in Mongolia, local men taking samples. I'm just writing down the results. But the idea is it's not very complicated, but it can give us lots of information. And in the end, what we have is this map of dust in Hanbog, Mongolia. So this is important because right here, this is Oyu Tolgoi mine. This is one of the largest copper gold mines in the world. So it's vast. It's 8 kilometers by 10 kilometers of land taken out of use from the herders. So that's the mine. And here's the town. About 3,500 people live there. So all the herders told me and thought the worst dust was all around the mine. Because logically, if the mine is causing problems, the closer you are, the more dust there will be. But here's our chart. The bigger the circle, the more the dust. So here's the mine, and we have some low ones, a couple of big ones here. But the thing that the herders couldn't explain, but what became important was that also here we also see lots of dust. And even here, this is over 100 kilometers away. So the dust wasn't dependent just on the mine. So when it came for the herders and the mine to negotiate about compensation and mitigation, how to reduce dust impact, we came to realize that dust wasn't such an important factor. So though they believed it, it wasn't, and our little boxes come up with a similar result that the 10,000 pound machine told them. So the difference was the herders watched this every day. They would go outside their ger or where they lived and look in the little box to see how much dust they had. So after that, they knew I wasn't coming to put dust in, or I wasn't coming to take dust out. So they were in control of it. So that was very fun. And then they believed, and then they could trust other things because they trusted the dust. And just for your own scientific information, more important than the dust on the herders' lungs and health is smoking. So if they're smoking, that you won't see any effect from dust. So that's just a medical fact that was relevant. So I looked online, if I'm going to be in Kyrgyzstan, what can I say about citizen science in Kyrgyzstan? I'm not sure what KEMEX is, or this group down here, but they actually have some images online about citizen science and environmental education here in Kyrgyzstan. So I'm not sure what they're doing, but the idea is here, why not use it as much as possible in secondary school, in universities. Kyrgyzstan is great, you have a beautiful environment. There are many things you might want to engage the communities with. Plus, it's spread out, so if you're in the north, it's a very different environment in the south. So if we talk about Bishkek, we're not going to learn anything about Osh or other places in your country. This is from our field trip to southern Kyrgyzstan, out by Chatkal and Alabuka. And a big issue, their first complaint was the water was being polluted and then there were no jobs from the mines. So if we're trying to find this out, we keep hearing that. So then if we ask about how do you test the water, there's this, well, it goes to Bishkek and we don't hear again, so we don't know, we don't believe whatever is happening. So if you ask them again, well, what do you do? This is their method, was the frog in the bucket method. So very, very formative type of research. And I was asked them to explain, and what they took some water from the river or from the reservoir, they put a frog in it, and what do you know, after 15 minutes, the frog died. So the water's polluted and we can't drink any of it, et cetera, et cetera. So I was very interested. I suggested to our researchers, at least, that there were other methods we could also do. And as I showed you, there's this little strip. They're very cheap. If we gave the community a few boxes of these, every day they could test in 5 different sites, 10 different sites, and they would better understand how polluted the water is. So I have no idea. I didn't have these strips with me, but between the frog in the bucket and this, you know, we have some possibility. All we need to do is encourage people. And if I need to bring strips from the UK, I can do that, or I'm sure they can be ordered here as well. But there are many ways we can deal with people right here in your own country. So my idea is to encourage it.
In the scientific community, this data set considered less credible than an actual scientist?
This would not be credible at all. So this would be yes, this has some credibility. Usually what they would do, they would have, like with the equipment, and test 10 sites, and then have 100 more of these or 1,000 more of these. So you have your general information. We see whatever this river has levels of pollution, and then we'd use the more fancy equipment to test and give you the details. So it's not the equipment. We couldn't take 100 samples, but this gives us 100 other places to correlate and to see if it's similar. So yeah, it does have credibility. This would have credibility. I've used this in a paper before. So it gives you peripheral information that's useful. As long as you don't claim we know everything, we claim this is what we do know. So yeah, it's effective, and it gives a lot more information than just opinion.
But, I would like to share. You have for centuries traditional knowledge. So it is a people science, what you're sharing just for 100 years old, problem-based,
Yeah.
encountering the data.
Well, that
traditional knowledge,
but
as you said, like this is not credible, but I think
what we can do is incorporate that. So
agriculture,
right.
There's even in geology and so on and so forth, ancient civilizations in India,
Right. No, we should incorporate it. It depends on what our outcome, what we want. So, people have many ideas about indications of rainfall or good water. So yes, it should be incorporated.
Actually, it's as we speak now, this happens in the villages, far remote villages, where they don't have access to knowledge and science. They do believe on these indications.
Yeah.
Just,
So they can be complemented by something like this, especially if we want to change a government's mind or behavior or a company's mind. Traditional knowledge, it's hard to convince people with traditional knowledge who don't believe or don't agree. But maybe traditional knowledge with more technical knowledge, then we can convince them. And our role maybe is just to add to their traditional knowledge so that we can take it to a wider audience. This is the professor I work with in Mongolia, Salman Renshin at the National University. She used citizen science with her students to actually help launch Mongolia's first satellite. So this is in cooperation with the Japanese, but it's them doing all this work that was enabled them to actually launch a satellite. So it really has a great impact for research for their country, for science, but also for the university to show what can be done, and it really encourages other students in other fields. So it's really the hard work of this one lady that does it. So it really takes personal effort to make all the difference in research. This is a more complicated one. This is from London. This is about transport, but just a different version of citizen science. If we look at it, you start here. Are you taking a car? Or are you taking public transit? And it's a you might say a decision tree. Well, what's next? Okay, are you taking a motorized engine? You're taking a bicycle, skateboard? Are you walking? Are you taking a car, motorcycle, scooter, or down here, you're taking the bus, the subway, a train, and you can see on your mobile phone, click this, I'm taking the train, okay, how far, or whatever like this. Then maybe you come out and you get a bicycle. This is going to show you the location of where you're doing this, the confirmation. Yes, I took, in this case, I took the car. I didn't walk. It gives you more information that then feeds into our research program that's tracking all this. So then Transport for London can make some of its decisions based on how people actually use it, because we always have ideas of how things are used, but this actually gives you some facts. This is what we need. So maybe they need more public transport in a certain area of London. And so I show this Excites Extreme Citizen Science. This is a multi-million-dollar project, not at Oxford, at the University of London, but we don't care where their work is done. We just want to encourage more citizen science. So they have a whole program. Feel free to look this up online about what they're doing. You can just go UCL, Department of Geography, Citizen Science, or just this Excites alone will get that. There's lots of information on the internet, but I can really encourage you to try and engage with it and think of what can be done here in Kyrgyzstan, particularly outside Bishkek. Bishkek has lots of information, lots of possibility. But as we go further away, as the gentleman mentioned, there's many more ways citizen science could be effective. This is from the US government about water, but you can think about this in how would this apply in Kyrgyzstan. So we're not going to watch for whales, but we might watch for Argali sheep, or if you have snow leopard, maybe snow leopard. There are many things. The same process can be done here. Fight harmful algae. This is about water pollution. I know it's an issue. ISICO people mentioned it about the mining, and will that affect the water pollution, et cetera. Take care of your local park. Right, we have lots of beautiful parks in Bishkek. How are they? What's the environmental health? How's the soil? How are the plants? Location, as we mentioned, tracking. This is the tides. This could be the weather. This could be the river flow, things like that. And of course, pollution everywhere. That's an issue. So these things should be an inspiration, a guidance in whatever it is, the issues that are important here to you, in your community. It can be addressed through citizen science. And citizen science is perfect. Not all science has to come out in a fancy paper or document. Citizen science might be more useful because more people have access to it. So we kind of end with this, with all these things go together: communication, interdisciplinary, environment, conservation, creativity, inquiry. It's really about asking questions. And that's what citizen science can do in so many ways, in ways that are important to local people, as well as the whole scientific community, as well as to government. So it's really, there's a place for it everywhere around the world. And I'll leave you with this picture. Any idea what the citizen science that went on here might be? It relates to literature. And there's a theory that Dracula started up in one of these little rooms up in the top of the Radcliffe camera. So I have personally been contacted actually from South America about people who are trying to investigate this, and they gave me a little map to go inside to see, is there a door here? Is there a hallway here? And so I too could be participating in their citizen science. So I went in there, you need your library card, you go in there. I drew my little bad drawings of what it was like and sent it to them. And maybe Dracula was there, or maybe not. Well, we may never know. But for them, it was an important literary project, though maybe it didn't change the world. All right, thank you very much.